Basically, for the conception phase, the goal is to create a concept, find the right business for the game, make sure there's a market for it, build a few prototypes to figure out what is our core gameplay, what is really the game about, and then at the end of the track for this phase, it's really to pitch it to the execs and go up the ladder in the hierarchy of the company and get it approved.
Follow a stage gate process, and every time you get clear goals and you get a clear timeline to complete those goals. At the end of the set goals, you have a presentation. Typically, for a new IP, for example, you get to do a sort of a small prototype. It doesn't need to be anything that even remotely looks like it's finished. We actually go to the board and to the CEO and to the CCO, Chief Creative Officer, and all the editorial team, and we present it. There's a debate, and then you either get a green light or a red light, in which case you go back to the drawing board or onto something else.
It's initially more about finding out what the core mechanic and interaction of the game is going to be, and establishing what that's going to be, more kind of what the gameplay loop is. So that's the big part of the job, is kind of developing the system, and the mechanics and how the game, laying out the game and like the flow of the whole game, kind of the big picture, and then all the details of how the actual interaction is going to be. Initially you work on kind of the core mechanic, and then you start looking at the broader, bigger picture of like, well, how do all the pieces fit together?
A lot of us have trouble explaining what we do to our parents. I consider programmers, engineers to be like enablers, so they really are there to make sure that we can do more cool stuff in the game. And we are involved almost from day one, like pretty much after the fact that they know kind of what the concept of the game they want to have. We need to have an engineering team start. Lead programmer needs to make sure he's going to build the proper team. Some games they require more AI programming. Some games they're very strong on the visual side, so they'll have more rendering engineers. So we have different disciplines within the programming field.
Yeah, those again, every single game seems to be completely different. Sometimes the basic storyline, and usually at least the world that you're in, is created by the creative director or maybe some of the principals of the project who aren't necessarily the writers. Sometimes those people do a lot of the writing as well. But at some point, it's kind of the characters maybe are more or less established, are the main ones, and the world that you're in, and the sort of story it is. And then they'll start talking to writers who are sometimes in-house, who work at the development studio, or sometimes they're people that come in as a contract situation, and they'll start coming up with plot twists and secondary characters and kind of throwing those out.
So the goal is really to make sure that we're going to choose the right technology. So in a company like EA, we have actually many different engines that we can use. So part of my role is to make sure we pick the right technology to start up from. And of course, even though you have an engine, you still need to add stuff so that you make it unique to the game that you're building.
Visuals typically become very important at the first playable period. Like before that, in conception, at the first gate, what's really important is the core of the experience, right? Or else you're just aiming for something that looks very pretty, but it's not, potentially not very fun. So we really try to focus on technology, on innovation.
Basically, my job is, where do I want to put the emphasis? Obviously, everything is from everything everywhere in the world, but what do you want to put the emphasis on? Do you want to have a gritty, dark type of environment? Do you want to have a sunny, lit type of environment? What type of emotions are you going for? So these are on a very high level. These are the kind of thoughts that I'm having. What type of emotion do I want to transfer to the player in the game? Right? What is he supposed to be feeling, and how can I achieve that with my tools?
But then what happens is people start designing the levels, and they'll go off in new directions. So the writer's kind of around to maybe try to rein those in, go, wait a minute, you're getting too carried away, or go, oh, that's an interesting idea. How can I change the story to support this interesting idea that the designers have?
My dispense are many. It's design, it's color, it's collaborating with sound and atmospherics, and all these things kind of coming together and say this is my vision, this is what I want these level to be like, this is what I want the game to feel like, this is what the player needs to go through in this part of the story. And working with design very closely together as they construct the level and say, oh, this will be really cool in terms of gameplay. I come in and say, okay, from a story perspective, from a gameplay perspective, from a visual perspective, how does it need to look to convey that particular feel?
The audio, in general. In film and television, it's quite simple. You shoot the movie, you edit the movie, you lock the picture edit, essentially, and then, you know, the audio...
Yeah, we do the rest. We do the post-production.
It's called post-production. In games, audio is not post-production. It's production, and pre-production, and post-production.
The Reapers are still out there.
And it's up to us to stop them.
The Council will never trust Cerberus. They'll never accept our help, even after everything humanity has accomplished. But Shepard, they'll follow him. He's a hero, a bloody icon.
It's got to be in there from the beginning, because in the pre-production phase, audio needs to be discussed as far as what kind of engine are they going to use, how much memory does it need, what is the artistic direction that it's going to go. You got to start planning all those things. And in production, you help in the iteration process. They need to make sure that this thing's going to work and not just kind of do it at the end from that technology point of view. And then in post, you know, there is no real post-production phase in video games, but audio is always also the last thing to really get polished, because if an animation changes, then the audio needs to be resynced and redone and all that kind of stuff. So we ideally get brought in as early as possible. We tend to get brought in as early as anything else, but that's changed. I think in previous years people waited until they kind of had a working game and then tried to slap audio on top of it. Lately, working with big companies like Ubisoft and EA, they're very good about that.
The testing job is not democratized enough. Some people will think that it's only like people sitting there and playing all day with no life, but it's not the case. Look at me! Well, there's a lot of specialized dominant testing. You can be a dev tester, which is a tester that is very close to the programmers, that will help them just to give their feedback on every iteration they're going to do.
Intense part of the development for programmers is the end of the project, because we've been building and building and building and adding features, but then we need to make sure that the game passes compliance tests. So all the consoles that we're making games for, Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo, they have rules. You're like, okay, your game can't crash. That's an obvious one. But they have a bunch of rules that we need to make sure we actually respect. And we also need to make sure that the gameplay is bug-free.
We also specialize just for testing the game to find bugs, which is not that easy if we just think of it, because playing a game, at one point you don't see anything, so it's really hard to just refresh your mind every time you're playing, just to make sure that you really are seeing everything. And this is a really, really big job, in fact, and there are really, really important people on the project.
In video games, one thing you learn very quickly is that nothing is ever the same. Like, every game is its own entity, and it has its own reality and its own different quirks. If you try to consider games like a formula, that's when you get trapped into like always having the same game come out with a different.
It's challenging. I think we're a young industry still, so we still have to learn the process in a movie. Is I think it's been there for a while. The medium doesn't change. It's always a projector and a screen. So they don't have a generation of console going on every 5 to 6 years. On our side, we always have to be the best, look the best. For this, you have to reinvent your technology and always have to push it to the limit. So, and this is what will make you successful. It's how far you can push it. So I think it's one of the challenges for our game industry. So it's hard to say like we found the right way to do it, because we still have to learn a lot.